On October 24, 1978, President Carter signed the Airline Deregulation Act. For years, the airline industry had been rigidly regulated by the government. By 1978, the general public and many government officials had decided that this system was no longer effective and that it was time for the airlines to be free from government regulation. This one piece of legislation, for better or for worse, would turn the airline industry in a whole new direction by radically changing the business for both the consumer and those working within it. Without the act, the airline industry as we know today may not have come to be. The United States economy of the 1970s was one of great instability. An oil crisis in 1973, rapid inflation, and other poor economic conditions were some of the primary reasons for this. Citizens began blaming government and its regulations for some of these hardships. One industry heavily regulated by the government was the airlines. Since 1938, airlines had been subordinate to the rules established by the Civil Aeronautics Board, better known as the CAB, a government regulatory agency. The CAB set ticket prices, decided what routes what airlines could fly, and controlled what airlines could enter and exit the market. The rules of the CAB gave airlines minimal business freedom. Given the general public's antipathy towards regulations at the time, many people started disliking the CAB. The new idea that airlines should be allowed to make their own business choices was emerging. This new idea was also making its way into Congress. Some congressmen, most notably Senator Ted Kennedy, started to make the case for deregulating the airlines. The airline industry itself did not exactly share the same opinion with the public.
I don't think there was any movement much within the industry to deregulate.
Some smaller airlines, such as Frontier, Piedmont, and Allegheny, embraced the idea of deregulation, seeing it as a way to grow. However, the primary airlines, such as TWA, American, and Eastern, were not so thrilled with the idea. These airlines actually benefited from some of the regulations and received special interest from the CAB. Given their size and prominence, the voice of the large airlines far outpowered that of the smaller ones. Despite a lack of airline support, interest for deregulating the airlines continued to grow in Washington. In 1977, President Jimmy Carter took office. Carter embraced the idea of deregulating the airlines and appointed Dr. Alfred Kahn as chairman of the CAB to speed up the process. Kahn, a well-known political economist and college professor, would become the last, yet most important, driving force of deregulation. Kahn spent his first 2 years as chairman diligently working towards his goal of creating a deregulated airline industry. First, he did everything in his power to relax regulations on the airlines. This was important because he used the successful results of that action to gain support from lawmakers. Kahn also worked with lawmakers to help formulate the deregulatory bill. His work paid off. When Senator Howard Cannon introduced the bill to Congress in April of 1978, it was met with minimal opposition from both the Senate and the House of Representatives. Later that year, on October 24, 1978, President Carter signed what would become the Airline Deregulation Act. Upon Carter's signing of the act, a new era for the airlines had begun. The Airline Deregulation Act called for a gradual diminishment of CAB powers. Congress set dates in which the CAB regulations would cease to exist. In 1985, the CAB closed altogether. At that point, only safety was to be regulated by the government. Airlines were, for the first time in decades, essentially on their own. In the beginning, the effects of the Airline Deregulation Act seemed to be in line with many of the desired outcomes. One of the aspects most emphasized in the act was the opportunity for new airlines and new competition. Competition was something the CAB had not encouraged. To protect airlines from competition, the CAB had rarely allowed for new airlines to open and new flights to be added. Now, without these limiting regulations, new airlines and new routes were seemingly appearing overnight. Competition was on the rise, ticket prices were going down, and passengers had more choices than ever. For the airlines, the business was being redefined. What for years had been a luxury industry based on services was transforming into a transportation commodity. The new, innovative deregulation carriers such as People Express and New York Air were giving the traditionally dominant airlines a run for their money. Many airlines assumed that the new, rapid expansion was to continue perpetually, and for some, that had a deadly outcome.
Braniff was an excellent example of someone who got killed by deregulation.
Anticipating ongoing massive industry growth, Braniff International Airlines of Texas bought an abundance of new aircraft and added dozens of new routes. Unfortunately, they had created too much supply for too little demand. In 1983, Braniff, who had once been a highly successful airline, was forced to liquidate and sell many of their assets to People Express, who ironically, the same thing happened to several years later. Braniff would not be the only casualty of deregulation. Other dominant airlines also began to experience major losses in result to the changing business. Many service-oriented airlines such as TWA, Eastern, and Pan Am found it impossible to compete with the newer, more cost-oriented airlines. Consequently, most of these legacy carriers went into bankruptcy and many even liquidated. Now, many of the airlines that were once classified as primary by the CAB are no longer in existence. Although a good number of carriers were not able to adjust to the significant changes in the business, some did come out strong. Southwest Airlines, a low-fare airline that was limited to flying within Texas during the regulated years, used the sudden freedom from regulations to expand their horizons across the United States. Southwest's unique yet very effective business model allowed them to become one of the most consistently profitable entities in the industry by the end of the 1980s. Today, Southwest is known as the model low-fare carrier and is one of the most significant airlines in the industry. Even a good number of legacy carriers found ways to adjust their operations to cope with the changing market. One of the first steps many legacy carriers took was reconfiguring their route networks. American Airlines was the first to discover that operating a centralized hub-and-spoke network leads to the most effective operations. In a hub-and-spoke network, operations are focused around one or several hub cities. Airlines have passengers connect with these hubs on the way to their destination, rather than flying point-to-point flights to that destination. Changing to this type of operations allowed for airlines to use their equipment more efficiently and to fill more flights. Not every airline has adopted the hub-and-spoke system, but for many modern airlines, it has become the backbone of their operations. Legacy airlines also became great at cost-cutting over the years following deregulation. Amenities such as in-flight meals and ample legroom that the airlines were well known for prior to deregulation were becoming items of the past. More recently, airlines have saved money by reducing capacity and engaging in mergers with other airlines. Some even argue that airlines are cutting corners in safety to reduce costs. Supporters of that claim use fatal accidents such as ValueJet Flight 592 and Alaska Air Flight 261 as evidence. In both those accidents, procedures have been done incorrectly in order to save time and money, and with a deadly outcome. However, the reduction of safety is not universally accepted. Statistics show that flying today is safer than ever. In fact, there hasn't been a fatal accident in the United States since Colgan Air Flight 3407 crashed near Buffalo 4 years ago. Although the encouragement of competition was one of the primary tenets of the Deregulation Act, the progression of the airline business has ultimately led to much less than anticipated. Legacy carriers were never in favor of this new competition and used a variety of strategies to eliminate it. One common strategy was to drive low-fare carriers out of their hubs. The best-known example of this was the controversy between legacy carrier Northwest Airlines and low-fare startup Reno Air in 1993. When Reno Air began flying to Northwest Minneapolis hub, Northwest temporarily lowered their ticket prices on routes competing with Reno Air. The promising Reno Air was soon forced to leave the Minneapolis market because they could not compete with Northwest's temporarily low prices. Once Reno Air left, Northwest ticket prices went back to their normal high. The natural evolution of the airline industry has also led to less competition. With airlines creating codeshare agreements and merging with each other, competition has been naturally reduced. Finally, events such as the September 11th attacks and the rise of oil prices over the last several years has led to a massive reduction of capacity, ultimately leading to less competition. It has been almost 35 years since the airline industry was deregulated. Over the years, the topic of deregulation's legacy has been an issue of great debate. Many people, including Dr. Alfred Kahn, believe that airline deregulation has been a success. However, many others believe it's been a failure. Even though there's a tremendous ambiguity of feelings towards deregulation, there is one aspect of it that virtually all agree on. It has transformed the airline industry. Deregulation took away the government control airlines for years have been subordinate to. Without regulations, airlines made new choices and took a new path towards their future. The many and ongoing effects of the Airline Deregulation Act are what shaped, and continue to shape, air travel as we know it today, and air travel as it flies towards the future.